all. Hopefully my internet connection is going to be good. This is a test because I just got internet at my house. Yeah, and I'm glad to have all of you here, including the bearded ones. Although actually that's describing a majority of the people in this call now, I'm realizing. Yeah, and so I think, well, actually, Van Gils has not been to one of these calls yet, but I think the rest of us have. Typically, we've started the calls up with kind of an opportunity to just kind of talk more generally about the summit and ask questions. And then kind of we see where that leads. Sometimes that leads into a good conversation, and that's where it'll take us. And then sometimes we can kind of direct things more we're needing direction. So I don't know if anything's arisen for anyone that they want to bring up, but the floor is open.
Well, I can say that what has arisen in this past week is a conversation between me and Corey about me stepping forward a little bit to help with the finances for the summit. So I'll be kind of running point on the global vision of how to make this happen financially. And I'm really, really excited about doing that. So if people have money questions, I'm happy to listen.
Hi, Anders. Yeah, great. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else kind of hanging for people. Anders, we're kind of starting off the call just by talking about the event more generally and kind of bring up any questions people have. So yeah, I mean, maybe it'd be helpful. I think. Well, I think most of the people have been in these calls, but just the kind of general vision we have for the event that we've talked about and kind of have developed over these past few meetings. Can you hear us, Anders? Is it working for you? So, cool. Well, the general idea is that this will be a 5-day or a 5-night event, and it's kind of combining the streams that we had last year, which were there was a 2-day summit in the city and then a 5-day leadership retreat. And so this one is kind of mixing both of those elements. So it'll be a summit, but it'll be a longer summit, ostensibly with more practice and more opportunities to kind of go deeper than we've had in a summit in the past. And it's kind of a new format for a summit, so it's all a grand experiment. Some of the stuff that's come up in the previous calls, we've talked a lot about how to make the summit socially relevant, how to kind of bring in groups and people who are working in the world and doing things that matter. And a lot of ideas have come up around that, including getting involved with talking to some groups that are operating within Europe, doing some kind of innovative social organizing, and then and also kind of groups involved with various social action causes, including things that are relevant to Europe and globally, like the refugee crisis. And then we've also just kind of generally talked about what we'd like to see at the event in terms of mix of having space for conversations. So we've definitely talked about using open space technology once again as being important. Also kind of what kind of practice we would like to do. There's some suggestions, I think, about doing like Shambhala Sadhana potentially together, and some other things. Yeah, I don't know. Is it, what am I missing? Anyone who's been at the call so far? Alex, you've been at every one. Rodriguez.
Yeah, I think you summed it up pretty well. The other thing that was starting to emerge in our last conversation last week was trying to talk to, well, a conversation started around kind of what the needs of, or what the needs and desires of some of the people who were calling from Europe were having. I know Leon and Leah both shared some really interesting sort of starting points for thinking about how we want to organize ourselves, what kinds of questions some people were having. One of which was this question around a particular desire to have some people who are starting actually to work in Shambhala centers as young leaders in the US, because that isn't happening yet in Europe. So that was identified as a possible place for some cross-pollination that would be fruitful at the summit. I hope you're planning on coming, AVG.
I am planning. I am.
Awesome. And Michael Busby was on the call too, and that's starting to that was something that got planted last week, I guess, that I wanted to add, and the other was working with sort of from the center perspective of working with just the real, like, urgent political social challenges that are happening, like Leah brought up, the work that needed to be done in the wake of the terrorist attacks in Brussels at the Brussels Center, and not just like in a sort of abstract way, like what do we do about terrorism, but like how do we work with our own community in the wake of these things happening in our community. So those were the other two things that came up last week that I remember.
Sounds really great, guys.
I remember specifically too from that conversation, this kind of other topic came up that actually I think is kind of interesting. Is this idea of like not only seeing young people in leadership roles in Shambhala, but how do we what's the skillful means to like actually integrate in their centers, especially in cases where there might be resistance. Because I mean there is kind of a natural energy that young people have, that a natural inclination of kind of seeing different issues, and that, and in some ways that can and will rub things. So it's like, how do you work with that, and how do you it's almost kind of like it kind of also went into this, like kind of brought up like the kind of mentor mentee thing of like that, like Shambhala, we're being given this model, and the Sakyong is emphasizing more and more this idea of mentorship. But there, and I think that, so half the equation is us being willing to be mentored, but also there's another part of the equation that a lot of people have experienced where a lot of people don't know how to mentor. Like it's a lot of times coming into those kind of relationships with kind of older, more experienced Sangha members, that their idea of mentorship is like telling you how to do things, and kind of not actually looking at you as an equal, or like having a conversation with you or wanting to learn from you. And that's really challenging. That kind of makes it a kind of as a one-way street, and I don't think that's beneficial for anybody. So it's like there's like a skillful means of how do you like get your voice in there, and then also how do you help people maybe like learn how to work with you.
Or even better, it could be like them telling you what they did, even though you know that didn't work, and then they leave because they're overwhelmed by the tenure of their job and they don't want to be around the Shambhala Center anymore. It's like ideal Shambhala mentorship.
So I guess I'm kind of bringing all this stuff up like, just to see what stirs up in people, so folks can like take this wherever it wants to go. And then if not, I don't know if Nick is ready to unload on us, unleash some wisdom on us, but I can always unleash the krantz.
I mean, we must have a ton of people in companies that have some kind of mentoring practice in place already, and maybe we can borrow some of their wisdom or manuals that they have.
Do you have any ideas of, like, Leon, of who that might be?
I didn't have anybody specifically in mind, but no, I don't have anybody in mind.
But I'm sure you're right. Yeah, definitely.
Well, I've happened to be on the receiving end of some pretty excellent mentorship from one of the people on this call, and so I would very much like to hear Nick talk a little bit about that.
I'm just wondering, I saw this thing from Fred that was like on the Slack about questions, conversation topics for next time. Is that like from something else?
Yeah, that's the group leaders monthly call that we had yesterday.
Oh, that's good. See, it's so important to have that.
It's metastasizing.
Very good. Good. Yeah, I mean, in terms of peer mentorship,
This is crazy, right, Nick? Look at this. Look at how many things they have going on.
It's so cool.
It's just incredible. It's like
it's wow, look, yes, seriously. I don't know what just happened while you were showing, but Anders was doing something amazing pan and scan shit going. I don't know what that was, but it was. I do appreciate it. Hello.
Having a onesie brunch.
Okay. Beautiful. Onesies are awesome. That makes a lot of sense to me. In terms of the mentorship in groups, I mean, I think Alex is also very aware of this kind of credo that's like, I don't know, unofficially, officially part of the Ziji mindset, maybe, but which is this idea that you're always looking to nurture and nourish people in your peer groups that are showing a certain level of energy and offering. And I've come to refer to this more generally and more confusingly, I think, and as opposed to like always be finding your successor, which is not always be closing, but similarly always be finding. I don't know what that acronym is, but so always looking for someone who could replace you. But on the other hand, I've been more confusingly saying it maybe as like meritocracy, which is just like looking at who's like sparking and radiating and showing a lot of interest and like actually connecting with them and talking with them and sort of inviting people in from the very beginning in a youth group to say like, hey, this is your place. This is like, we're not consumers here. We're participants. So I found just that attitude that we are empowered to do that, and that is like our culture maybe, to kind of constantly be looking at how we can nourish people who are naturally wanting to connect, but also identifying people and saying, hey, would you, feel free to like jump in and help out with anything. This is your group. Like even that kind of sounds like such a simple thing to transmit. But actually, if I come into a group and somebody says that to me, it's kind of unusual and, you know, perhaps inspiring. Like, oh, really? So I think that's like a basic continuity of practice that seems really kind and helpful. To kind of hold that idea that it's constantly, and that also plays into some really interesting stuff around, for me, like peer mentorship and natural hierarchy. And so, you know, if you haven't read Sacred Path of the Warrior, of course, read it, but then you'll just have like all this incredible information, and probably if you're like me, it won't like stick, and you'll have to read that book like hundreds of times because it's all in there. It's crazy. But chapter 17, natural hierarchy, you know, just reading that and getting a sense of like, what is this thing? Automatic. It's not like we just get it, but like, how do you kind of see that people already have these incredible qualities right before you? And it's like, how do you support them in that? How do you place a seat underneath that quality and encourage them towards like, wow, you're really like amazing at organizing or something like that. Would you be willing to like take over the coordinating? You know, something like that. It's like acknowledging what you see as opposed to like, you know, trying to hold and keep things. You know, it's like, whoa, what's happening here? And I don't know if that's helpful or not, but definitely it's a fun thing. Mentorship is like, wow, how are we the Power Rangers? Like, what are we doing, and how do we support each other? And like, how do we unite into one thing, and how do we have separate things and without limiting each other or pigeonholing? It's because maybe I want to wear the black costume next week. You know, have you thought about that?
That's super relevant to what has been on my mind Ziji-wise, especially over this last couple of weeks, which is starting to plan my own plans for attending the summit in September, and also working with some other very inspired Chileans in the Santiago Center who want to attend the summit this year. And just starting to reflect on that, it's become very clear that there are some things that need to start happening now, and that I don't have a way of seeing that field and being able to really know where to make the invitations, particularly with folks in Europe where I have the fewest connections. Like I know Bea, and I know Lou, and I know Ree, and that's it. So I think in order for that process to work like on this global scale that we're on, it's going to require some conversations between inviters, you know, like after this, Lou and I are going to have a conversation addressing this exact question so that someone with a closer view to the ground can help. But I feel like that sort of crossways conversation, this call obviously is a big part of that. I'm just expressing a desire for that to sort of become a little more established, and also be I'm just 100% there to serve whatever it takes to make that a little stickier and make those conversations a little more possible. I'm not sure what other people need to make that happen, but I'm absolutely there for it.
The other thing I'm curious about too is kind of how can we bring that atmosphere and that attitude into a summit itself, and like the planning and the execution of a summit. Because I think that's one of the things I've really appreciated about Ziji Summits, like last year's summit, was there's this sense that it was really creative, and we were kind of really thinking about form and how, and like kind of maybe even creating new forms, or kind of at least experimenting with relatively new forms from the stuff from art posting. But it feels like that's like could be really part of the atmosphere of a summit, is this idea of kind of like I don't know, meritocracy. And so that could like extend beyond the summit, like identifying people at the summit who are good at certain things and asking them to be involved with Ziji Collective. But also within the summit, it could be like, you know, because I have to say, from running the coordination side of things, we're working with a blank slate right now, pretty much in terms of like the specific duties and roles. Besides the fact that we have some folks in Berlin who have really stepped up and helping make it happen, but like we could very easily decide that we want to come into the summit and be like, well, we could have people kind of identify themselves. I mean, you know, there's a wisdom, there's a level, like we don't want to like say like, well, we don't know who the coordinator is. That's maybe a little too extreme, but you know, there could be like a level of like allowing things to emerge, or activities to emerge, ideas to emerge, people to emerge, that could happen.
That's totally what open space is about, right?
In a way, but open space I still feel is a little more constrained than that, because it's allowing conversations to emerge. So that's definitely true. But it's what I'm thinking about, or kind of this is provoking in me, is something even more open than that, in the sense that there could be like maybe unscheduled time in the program that isn't even open space technology necessarily. Like it could be a group decision what happens with it, or that there could be just like room within the program for kind of ideas to emerge and catalyze. But yeah, open space is kind of like, it's like that, but it's a little more it's a little more like, I don't want to say constrained, but it's like the idea is that it's like conversations, you know, and there is like a bit of a form that like it tells you where to go and stuff like that. But this, like if we like do open, like I'm talking about, it could be like the whole group could decide we're going to, I don't know, like have a dance ball, or I think that's ideas come up with, or I don't know, go crab walk in the park, or I don't know what it can be, you know, it's like.
Yeah, what you're describing, Corey, sounds a lot to me like the distinction between the sort of new forms of protest and direct action organizing that are starting to develop around the world, you know, like post-Occupy, which I know was a big inspiration for the Ziji Collective in the first place. And of course, and Europe is where it's flourishing right now too, you know, thinking about the night protests in Paris, and like the 5-star movement, Podemos, and things that are happening in Europe right now that like, and I think that the distinction that you're describing is the distinction between creating a space for conversations and creating a space for action that is just as open, which to me is something I'm super curious about. Those resources are out there, and I'd love to like learn more about it from people who are closer to those points. And we discussed that a little bit last week. Leon mentioned that he knew some people in Denmark who were doing this kind of work, and so just want to say that sounds really similar to what you're describing.
There's one thing that came to my mind when Nick, you talked about mentorship. There's this book around in Europe these days, which is called Reinventing Organizations. I don't know if you've heard of it. And it's written by a Belgian guy. It's in English, and you can download it for and give as much as you want, pay later. And it's really mind-blowing research on self-organized companies with thousands of employees, partly. And it's really, in terms of organization and decision-making tools and all this. I read most of it, but I haven't come to a very interesting part, which is he explains methods and tools in the end, apparently. And which I haven't yet. And but this book is really amazing. It's mind-blowing. Even the first, only if you want to read into it, the first 50 pages about how work and organizational structures have developed in the last few thousand years. It's really amazing.
Gosh, I kind of love for you to finish it and like share your cliff notes with us. Not that I wouldn't suggest reading it if people have the time, but I'd be fascinated to see what your takeaway on it is too.
Totally. I'm going to, but it might be another few weeks.
one quick thought that came up just hearing this sort of ping pong around was the notion of spontaneous mentorship too, where maybe if we check in as a group at the beginning of the summit, which sometimes we say like, I'm from here and I'm interested in this, and it's kind of like a mini spark radiate that, Alex was doing, and kind of like people are sharing what they're into. And then maybe it's almost like if somebody's coordinating a group, maybe they could shadow, you, Corey, or whoever's, coordinating, and like, for a day or two, and then someone else could come in, and there's just some kind of, or maybe they stay with, I don't know, but some kind of like spontaneous integration, and like, okay, let's just fucking do it,
Especially if the summits are annual, and they can immediately begin planning the next summit in that moment. I don't know if I know everyone. I'm realizing. Oh, have we met? I don't think so. I'm Alex from San Francisco.
Hi, Alex.
Where are you from, Leon?
I'm originally from the Cologne area. I was born in Bonn, and I moved to Basel last fall in Switzerland, and I'm studying here now. A thing called post-industrial design, and it's really mind-blowing, amazing.
Awesome.
Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Alex, did I meet you at that swing dancing thing in Denver?
It's possible.
Were you there with Nathan?
It's possible for sure.
Okay. I think maybe
It
I
was
did.
either me or Cody. I do go to things like that with Nathan from time to time.
Sorry I was late, guys. Nice to see you all.
Good to see you.
I don't know. I like that idea though of spontaneous mentorship. Is really interesting. Is everyone hearing me? I don't know. My internet seems to be slow.
I think that one of the challenges I'm imagining of this setup that Nick is describing is figuring out sort of who goes first, because that's the sort of chicken and the egg situation with this sort of spontaneous thing, is where if on the one hand, if we set up who the people who are going first is, then that's sort of a step away from being spontaneous. But on the other hand, if we're not clear enough about what we're trying to do, then nobody shows up, or people show up with so much confusion that we sort of sit around staring at our belly buttons the whole time, So I feel like those are the two kind of extremes, but there's probably somewhere in the middle that we could come up with.
So that's why I think that these open space, not just open space in general, but specifically the art of hosting that's starting to become more used in our centers is so good, because one thing that I really learned as a kind of hard lesson in my time with the Ziji Collective is that you think you're being open, but you're privileging people and ideas, etc., on a subconscious level in every possible second. And so unless you have a structure that's like specifically built to work against that, you're going to end up with like a primacy of ideas and people sharing things, whether you like it or not. I think that these art of hosting things are pretty inspiring because of the way that they're built to specifically create a situation in which I don't know if you could even say unbiased, but an unbiased idea has the chance to come forward.
I'm wondering if there's some online structure or a system that you have where you have maybe a schedule set up, how you're planning on structuring the day, and those kinds of documents starting to pile up.
You did that for Mexico, yeah, Corey?
Yeah. I have to say that it's that we're a little early in the process to have much like that right now, but I think that the idea is very good for sure of being kind of transparent about this stuff, and kind of I think that could be expanded further even. There's still room within there to kind of invite feedback and invite participation somehow. Just to kind of clarify just the way this is all in terms of the planning is going is that there's a Trinley Shastri Trinley Busby is she's leading a teaching team, which I think Nick is going to be on, so we have a representative of that here. And that team is going to take a lot of the feedback that we receive from these calls, and then there's also some other processes that we're going to engage in to kind of help form the program for the event. So that's kind of one of the reasons why we're having these calls, as a way to kind of gather this feedback and kind of discuss ideas. Sorry, I'm turning my webcam off because my internet connection is a little slow, so it's making things better.
And also, just in terms of how all these different things piece together, that's kind of playful and challenging and beautiful. The different technologies we have, and then sort of just maybe clarifying in terms of spontaneous mentorship. There's also perhaps an opportunity that more than one person, it's not like just one, you can only be one Padawan, it's maybe more like there's many people, that are interested, and they all just come along. And that's actually a module-like essence or aspect of the training, is that your interest is the key to the door. There's no ceiling. There's no so, that's totally the spirit of that from my point of view. The other thing I wanted to say is, I don't know if everyone here has heard the talk from the last summit in Mexico about triangle, circle, square. Yes, no, maybe, no. Okay, this is crucial continuity stuff from my, yes, I will share the link. I think it's somewhere. This is an amazing talk by the Kalapacharya, and it was so cool to be there, because Marguerite was in front of Adam and was drawing out what he was saying as this amazing, beautiful work of art in real time. So it was just it was mesmerizing and very, very powerful. And it was essentially, it's been a personal koan, I think, continuing from that, which is, and I won't say much more than this, just give the basics, and then you should definitely listen to the link. I'll dig up for you. But the triangle is, this notion of hierarchy, and, sort of the traditional notion of there's the Sakyan, His Majesty, at the top of the triangle, and, unnecessarily so from a certain point of view in terms of meritocracy and qualification and ability to transmit certain things. And then there's this square notion, which is council, different specialties, different sort of, and then the circle is the wisdom of the group, and the sort of equality of that wisdom, and wisdom of equality, and how the three, and actually apparently this is not a new human problem. In Zen calligraphies, you'll see there's a circle, triangle, square, and in the talk, I think Adam even mentions that Tolkien was very big on this symbol as a really powerful symbol. So I don't know, it's just a really beautiful contemplation, and I'll try to dig it up for you guys.
And another thing that this inspires in me, and something I wanted to talk about specifically in this call, was the idea of what forms do we want to bring into the summit specifically, because we actually do have a pretty decent toolbox at this point. And in fact, that toolbox could continue to expand. So I'd love to see other forms be brought in, but we have all this stuff from the art of hosting, as we're talking about. And then there's we have social meditation, which was kind of one of my little side agendas of bringing Nick in to see if anyone kind of had questions about that, or he wanted to talk about how social meditation could be brought in. There's also other forms like Spark Radiate that we've talked about. In fact, it might be good if there's if we want to because I'm guessing that some people are not familiar with some of that stuff, like for example, Spark Radiate or social meditation maybe. So maybe it might be good to talk about those briefly. Ziji, can I get you to talk about? Can you get you to brief Spark Radiate since you're in the birthplace of it?
Sure. Do you guys know about Pechakucha? Has anyone heard about Pechakucha? So it's this form. I actually just went to one. I just presented at one in Oakland a couple of days ago, and they're actually pretty popular. But it's this kind of form where you have a group of people. Some of those people are presenters, and each presenter gets, rather than like a kind of keynote talk, they get like a very short moment, like maybe 7 minutes with like 38 slides that are changing every few seconds. And the person can basically do whatever they want in those 7 minutes to get across their idea. And then from that, like now that you've had maybe these like 5 presenters each present for a few minutes with a bunch of pictures, and there's a sense of what these ideas was, then it becomes, what do you do with those ideas? So for example, this one that I was just at in Oakland is called Oakland Stock, and stock as in soup, because everyone's like having soup together. It's like a meal. And then what people do with that time after the presentations have happened is that everyone decides where the money that came from the admission fee to the event goes. It's going to go to one of the presenters. So there's a process of people kind of voting and figuring out where that money is going to go. So basically, for me, the Ziji Collective version of what happens after that presentation time of the Pechakucha was, how do you connect people around those projects that were inspiring to them, and make connections and have some sort of follow-up on how the projects were developing, and so people could actually kind of present in the future on, well, this is something that started when we got together at Spark Radiate 6 months ago, and this is where it's led. And I think that it was something that was the kind of center of what Ziji Collective was in the Bay Area. We did many of them, and it was the way that people came into the Ziji Collective. It was the way that various kind of activities in terms of artistic projects, social in the Bay Area. Part of like what happened when I became center director is that a lot of the people on our Ziji Collective team also took leadership roles within Shambhala, and that's one of the things that I'm kind of sad about, is that the Spark Radiate continuity was somewhat dropped in favor of us all getting involved in basically Shambhala administration and governance. But I think the idea is really good. I think the format is simple and yet could still be refined. And I'd be really happy to engage in both sharing what I learned and what I did with that form, and also exploring how to make it better. I should also say that my primary collaborator in this, who I couldn't have done it without and couldn't have designed it without, was Katrin Welch. And I hope that she'll be coming to the summit. I'm sure she could add a lot to say around this as well.
I just wanted to piggyback on that and add that the Ziji Collective website redesign, and which later became the Slack channel and the communications team, was something that the Spark Radiate at the first summit in San Francisco helped to kind of bring into the world.
Thanks, Alex. That's a good example.
Yeah, and another thing I wanted to add, just sort of going back a little bit to this sort of this process conversation that we're having about what to do at the summit, is also to recognize that what we're doing right now is planning the summit. And I think in the spirit of that sort of spontaneous stepping forward and organizing, like, I just really, really want to invite anybody who's inspired and who has ideas to step forward with them and to make a proposal, to suggest something. I think that is absolutely essential to this working. And so, in other words, that just add to what Corey was saying, that blank slate is one that is inviting you to fill it.
We've added a Melissa Carter.
Hi, everyone. Good to see your faces.
Corey, did that kind of answer your question, or do you have another specific question about Spark Radiate and the kind of general concept?
No, I think it's good. I mean, I'm more curious if anyone else has questions about it who maybe are unfamiliar with it, who have never done it before. Guess not. Yeah, I'm bringing these up partially because I think it's interesting to think about how we can, incorporate these things into the summit. Because it is kind of what we're engaging in, just like Nick is talking about triangle, circle, square, and this kind of experimentation with how like what's the right form for the different areas. We're going to be doing that in kind of in a broad scale for this whole event, where we need to make decisions about when's the time for teaching, when's the time for open space technology or discussions, when's the time for other forms. So it's kind of like it's worth talking about what forms we're going to incorporate, and like what's people's vision for the event in terms of that too. I mean, like, I can tell you for myself that I definitely am looking forward to, will appreciate times of teaching, of kind of like more of a teacher and student format. But at the same time, obviously, as I've said, open space technology is important. It's important to me to have those conversations. And I'm hoping that we can really turn this, have some space for a lot of ideas to come up in this event that can that will extend beyond it, so that it's both like a place of training and kind of gathering, and also a place of like creating new flowers. We're turning our soil, and we're also planting seeds, both for like Ziji Collective, but also just in the world. So that's my idea or my vision, but I want to hear what that perks in people.
I'm wondering a little bit if you have maybe I'm hearing that you have a certain view of open space, and I'm wondering if we have the same understanding, because I've experienced open space very much, also to be able to for workshops to come up, or very much a teacher student kind of thing going on, so that somebody offers a workshop where they are able to teach something, or some very knowledgeable people come and offer their knowledge spontaneously. It doesn't always have to be a conversation, I think. And yeah, I mean, and the other thing is maybe I've been to a thing, a 1 week congress of some kind in Sweden about a month ago, and they had a brilliant structure of talks in the first part of the day. Yeah, first half with a break at second part of structure, and again with a break in between to give people some air. And it was a half-hour break where people could have a tea together and talk about what they experienced, or just get some fresh air and all that. And then at night there would be some kind of celebrative activity. And maybe I don't know if this would be already a structure that, or if deciding or suggesting some kind of structure would already bring new ideas, or give you, or give us, or however you want to call it, give us a grid that then allows us to be more creative in these limitations. And I mean, I come from a SunCamp background, and we have a structure, and also developing over the week. And you would have at a certain point, which was interestingly the same thing at this thing in Sweden at the Initiative Forum, it was called, where at a certain day we would go out and work in a garden altogether, 250 people, and work for a small community supported garden, and get our hands dirty. And then afterwards, about a week after we had left, we had done the 250 people, was about a week of work that we had accomplished for them. And so this was something really nice. And it's like at SunCamp we have a skirmish. It's something that totally is a seizure in our or an interruption in our daily activity at SunCamp. And so yeah, come up with, and then maybe later find out that it doesn't work the way you thought it would, but still you can use it as a first orientation. I don't know how strong you want suggestions and initiative to be. I mean, I can suggest some daily structure that I've had very good experience with, but yeah.
Can I just say, Leon, please do this for what this grid might look like. And as soon as we can start getting some things on the wall like that, that will help everybody else in getting things to stick. So please do. I'm super excited to hear more about the specifics of the idea.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say something that I keep thinking about is how at the last year, the leadership retreat that happened after the summit and at Casa Huerma, one of the things that was super inspiring was that as a group, we created the final event, like the banquet that you would normally have, that normally the coordinator would oversee all of that, but as a group, like, people just self-selected, like, who wanted to plan, who wanted to execute, and it ended up being really cool because it was like we just thought outside of the box of what, you know, I think would have been created otherwise, and it was like awesome. So I'm just thinking about, like, I feel like I would love to see some time, like, during the summit where the whole group gets to come together like that and create part of what's happening in that way, because that felt like, oh, here we get to right now during this experience, we get to put that into action. And that feels a little bit different than the pieces that are also like, let's start conversations and think about projects that we can do outside of this space, which is also super important. But then, like, yeah, curious about where can we, like, be practicing that really during the actual summit.
Yuko, that just reminded me, one of the things I loved. Can you hear okay, guys? Great. One of the things I loved was sitting around the fire and how important the fire became as part of the program. And that's something obviously we're not going to be able to do in Neukölln in Berlin. But I think it would be really good to think about the architecture of the space a little bit and how, as a group, we might navigate that or navigate the evenings, or because that could have a bearing on the quality of the time we spend together, because we are going to be in a city, but maybe sometimes we can still create containers in the evenings when we might not be in the conference place or wherever.
We need a post-industrial designer.
Lou, I completely agree, and that actually reminds me of a very sort of related kind of short-term practical question that I have. Hi, Ana Paula. Which is, how many people are we planning on accommodating in the space? And it's related to the architecture of the space, but it's actually really important for me as the Chagzo, as a sort of financial person, to know how many people are planning on coming. And okay, so Corey's sending me a text saying capacity is 100, and so that means, I think, looking into what, like Lou was saying, maybe a little bit of how that space would work, whether the capacity, what the capacity would look like with cushions, what the dimensions of the space are, like that level of detail is something that we can actually do, like now-ish, that can have us, that can give us an accurate sense of how many people we want to have there, which I think is a really important sort of first step in thinking about how, from the financial side, how we can make sure that we're as diverse and as inclusive and accommodating to that number of people as we can be. But I feel like that's a really concrete sort of productive limitation that we can work with. I just need some help with in kind of someone to help figure that out with. So.
Josh, can I ask something to be thought of with the teaching team? So I heard about the triangle, square, and circle upon people returning to my area from the summit, and I think something that kind of has been sticking in my mind is that we often triangle when we try to square and circle. Like we have a square, like a council, and ostensibly it's these four pillars speaking to each other, but because maybe some people are staff, some people are volunteers, or maybe just because some people's personalities come to the fore, we end up triangling. And I think the same thing often happens in a circle situation. So I think that one thing that would be really helpful for me, just from the point of view of teaching, or activity or workshops or something, is like how to train ourselves to be more skillful in these three various shapes, you know, because it actually goes for the triangle too. It's like when we're in a triangle situation, how can we really do that and give the point of the triangle what it needs and allow it to give us what it needs, you know? And so like I think that there's an essential kind of maybe confusion and difficulty around allowing ourselves to be and be comfortable in those three shapes. So working with that, I think, could be a really powerful teaching situation.
Yes, thank you. That's actually such a good point. I appreciate you highlighting that. And I certainly feel like, you know, it's a very humbling and vast contemplation. And I'll definitely, you know, pass that along. And I also feel like if we just take a moment and visualize or sensualize ourselves in Berlin, I've never been to Berlin, but I can imagine, right? That's still a great thing. So I'm imagining it. I'm there and I'm seeing people and like, oh, then Yuko walks, oh, and then Alex, and oh my gosh, and I get to see in person again, Lou, and oh my God, well, I could go on and on. And finally, Leon, and I just hug you, and I just can't help it. I suddenly hug you. You're like, what the fuck? And you're like, you know, like he's like that. And then, you know, we get to know each other. But I feel there's this energy in the air. It's buzzing, and like there's something electric. And I spent the day yesterday with Eva Wong, and I don't know if you all know her or not. Yeah, it seems a lot of nodding. Okay, very powerful, amazing human being. And she was talking about in the Taoist tradition how they have like these, you know, you could get nerdy and correlate them to the four dignities, and I won't go there. But there's, you know, situational awareness, which is literally just like knowing what's going on. And she was using the example that like if you're in your phone, you know, like, and someone comes on the public transit and they have a physical, you know, disability or challenge, and you don't see them, so you don't get up and offer them a seat. And she's saying how, you know, that kind of lack of awareness is really challenging. And so she's saying, okay, situational awareness, very important. And then it naturally, when you have situational awareness, then you have empathic awareness, right? We start actually being sensitive to each other and being touched by each other if we're actually paying attention. And she also talked about contemplative awareness and playful awareness. But some notion of that there's like a trust that we are probably trying to build, and that any system we use will ultimately come back to interactions. And, you know, I think, not to get teachy here, but there's a quote from Trungpa Rinpoche, which is the warrior fundamentally is someone who's not afraid of space. And the coward lives in constant terror of space. And so I just thought that's such a powerful, simple quote. And I feel like some of this process work, we absolutely have to get clear and understand capacities and fundraise and think of schedules and things like that. But one of the things that I'd love to see, and I'm not quite sure how this happens, but is time within our time together to trust in situational awareness, empathic awareness, playful awareness, and this kind of dance that happens in real time. That there is gaps in the schedule, because we're in danger of living at a phone and computer pace in the world, and it's not a human pace. And it also can suffocate some of the flow and energy of natural communication. As obviously the work that I'm involved with, social meditation, is very much about working with our fear of space and our kind of engagement with space. And it's meant to be an enriching kind of presence type of practice, or practice that helps us work with how we are in the space as opposed to what we do. So it has a very different emphasis. It supports, hopefully, and its point is that we emerge kind of knowing how to hold our own heart in space. And then what we do has more potency. and people can really kind of go deeper that way. That's the idea behind it in a nutshell. But in terms of like, so obviously I also use it as a way to, it's partly how I teach, which is to create environments where people are on the spot collectively, and that their wisdom can emerge collectively and individually. And so that's part of why I feel so drawn to that work. It's sort of something I think that is important. But that said, I feel like, just segueing back to the structure of this thing, it's so important for us to be contemplating together, in real time, what we want to do while we're together, and making sure there's room for that in the schedule. I don't think I'm saying anything that hasn't been already said here, but it's a weird thing to like schedule in time that we will determine together what it is. It's like, that's actually very intentional, and it's different than saying like, shit, there's just this blank gap in the schedule and people are going to go fuck off and like be on Facebook. Like, that's definitely not. Like, that will happen anyway, I'm sure, but less, because there's so much energy, right? When we're together, it's like that shit becomes so. So anyway, that's yeah.
It's like when what's her name? When I can't remember who it was. It might have been Dixie Good, when she was telling us to make sure to tag, like hashtag what was going on with like Rinpoche's talk on Shambhala Day or Harvest of Peace, maybe it was her. And it was like, it's a really good idea, but we're like listening to the Sakyong, so we don't remember to like tweet.
Totally.
I like what you said, Nick, and it reminded it just reminded me of this idea that I think, scheduling in this time where we're going to figure out things together, or letting some of those design issues be left to the group in the moment, is actually a really terrifying thing to do a little bit. And we're practicing leaning into that space and that groundlessness, and that there's probably going to be some awkwardness in that, just like there is in any situation where we're hanging out in space together, but that it's really valuable, and it's part of what's so rich about what we're doing.
Yeah, and we shouldn't forget that we're summoning a group of so interested and competent people, all involved in leading groups. And so if you leave them the space to be helpful, they will probably all jump in. And so we really, that's the least thing we should be afraid about, leaving some space.
And I mean, we'll have enrichment, we'll have sitting, we'll have practice, we'll have little modules we can offer. But I think then also there's like, now what? What do you do with all that? Let's fucking dance,
I have a kind of process question that I wanted to toss out to this group around. We've been having these Sunday video calls every day at the same time over this past month, and I feel like I've been at all of them, and I feel like there's been a tremendous amount of momentum that has started to come out of those calls. Like that each one, I feel like we're getting closer and closer to sort of having some collective wisdom around that, and it's following exactly the principle that Nick is describing of we're making space in this virtual room in Zoom and gathering and doing that. And I just want to see if it's possible to this month, and then we're scheduling a sort of a more kind of detail oriented planning call for this time next week. But I would really like to see that happen. I won't be able to keep participating in the calls necessarily every week, but like I feel like this space is something that we've created that that works in a certain way, and maybe might be a little bit of a ground point that we can reach out to for the people who can't participate in this particular kind of space, to use it as like a way of gathering those of us who can, to then reach out to other people to start creating more spaces for, because I feel like if we can do a little bit more of the sort of getting to know you work, the part that doesn't require us being physically together and engaged in the sort of sprint of the summit together, that will actually like unpeel some of the layers that will allow what really needs to happen to happen. I'm happy to help organize that too. I also just wanted to say thank you to Corey for doing the work to get it this far.
I might just quickly come in on that, Corey. I was just wondering, how are you, and how's the how does it feel workload wise?
Yeah. Well, I'll split my thoughts between the two of you here. I think, yeah, things are, I think generally we're kind of moving into a phase, I think, with this event where we're kind of starting to grow a team. So Alex stepping in is a big start to that. I think we're going to be doing a lot more work on that. There's going to be a call next week at the same time that's going to be, yeah, specifically around communications and publicity. And I to say all of you are invited in that call. If it's a topic that interests you, or even if you're just kind of curious. But I think that it is going to be more of like kind of a work-oriented meeting. And I think that yeah, so I think that's the stage we're at with this event right now, is that we're building, kind of expanding the team, and in the next month or two, we're going to really hit the publicity circuit hard in terms of kind of doing a bigger promotion of the event, going especially to Shambhala centers, including a flyer and things like that. And we're going to at the same time, yeah, kind of try and kind of get all networking going on, and also some efforts to help people fundraise to make it to the event. And then in terms of the calls, yeah, I mean, it's an idea I've certainly had too, Alex, of kind of keeping the space open. Yeah, I'm kind of curious to see what people's response to that is. Would you keep coming to these calls? And you know, I think one of the things that I was feeling like they needed, especially after the first couple ones that were just sort of open-ended, was having some sort of like theme or guest. And so that's why the last couple ones we brought in Trinley last week and Nick this week. So it kind of feels like that was necessary. But I don't know. Perhaps I could pass this ball off to someone else at the same time, though, and in terms of what these calls are used for and how they're organized. Because I think, yeah, we do have this space we've created, which is great, and I think that there's probably a lot of people who we haven't talked to yet, who we could still get involved with the calls, especially when we start to do kind of a more concerted publicity push in the next month or two. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to hear about the event who have not yet heard about it, and so having a space like this to kind of discuss it, but also just to kind of I think kind of having these conversations kind of energetically seals it a bit, where it's like you see other people in a kind of semi, you know, as close to a physical way as you can get without being in the same place, and that kind of creates something a little more real, I think. So yeah, I guess maybe that's what I would like to say on that, is that I think it's a great idea, but maybe I've been looking for some other people to take the baton from me on that.
I'm not volunteering because I've got lots on my plate, but would be really cool to have a European to facilitate, and also it might be worth cutting down the frequency, so it was one a fortnight or maybe one a month, or I don't know what people might think about that.
I think that's a good. I think every other week might be a better frequency, and I completely agree that if we could have someone from Europe facilitating, that would be really great too.
Going back to Nick's discussion about how to invite people in, I wonder how we could find someone from Europe.
I think this is a perfect example of where we're having this sort of meta conversation, and one of you who is close to that situation, Lou or Leon in this case, judging by geography only, could generate a list of a small number of people, of like maybe 6 or 8 people who you know are already active and motivated and would be interested in this, and then to make that personal invitation, either to that group or individually to each of those people, saying this is just sort of giving a summary of what has happened, what the vision for continuing the calls would be, and inviting that person to do it. I feel like you know who those people are. I don't, but that you do, Lou, and Leon too probably knows some of these people are, and even just now, like, I'm noticing that I know more about what Lou knows than about what Leon knows, because I've met Lou and I've talked to him before. So just I basically just totally trust the two of you, and maybe also Bea and Leah and the 3 women from Germany who have been on these calls previously, to know to sort of build a pool from that.
One thing I was going to say, just as a general thing, is that in some ways there's as much distance between England and Austria as there is between America and Austria. And then the other thing I was just going to ask Leon, maybe if you've got any ideas, any insight about who might be good to approach, or yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a few sources where we could draw from. The people organizing the youth retreat are definitely one. Sun Camp veterans are one. In the Netherlands, there's a bunch of groups, young groups, happening, and they should definitely be in that letter, mail, whatever. I know that in Cologne there's very persistent. There's the Haydn twins. They've been for the last few years every other week organizing we call it under 30 meditation group, and my mother is leading the Shambhala Center, and she please don't tell them that, but she calls them the Stoic under 30 group instructors, and I know Sarah is very interested, and we've had this meeting, Lou. I don't. You probably remember at Ditch and Drilling, where we sat together and said we were all interested in organizing something. And what? Who else was there? Leah, I think. Yeah. These are my suggestions. And yeah, the Fround twins and their sister you've met already, you know already, and yeah.
I'm a bit exhausted at the minute, so I really want to not be part of this if I can. It sounds like those are all really, really good pools to draw on. There's also the northern, they kind of call themselves the Northern Clans, Helsinki and Stockholm. I just wondered if maybe someone else from this conversation, I wondered, I don't know. I don't think I can take this on anyway.
Yeah, that's all right, Lou.
I had a
Go ahead, Maria.
Oh, my thought was there's already been people on the call from Europe and they've come once. And I feel like part of it is not just getting the maximum number of people, but continuing to draw people in so that there's investment and coming back. And so even like reaching out to the people who already were on these calls and saying like, hey, we really want to hear more about what you're doing. Like, can you come back? And then lead a discussion.
And I think trying to respect what Lou is saying too, which is that I've noticed this, that there are different, it's one thing to really craft a good invitation. And then it's another thing to put that invitation into the hands of the right people, and I feel like, what I want to make sure doesn't happen is that the people who are able to deliver the message to the right people don't tap out because they don't have the time and energy to do the crafting to do the more sort of labor intensive work of like really crafting a good invitation. And so, I'm happy to do some of that work in the short term, like in the next 2 to 3 weeks, before I leave for going back to the States and going to Russia, and to kind of help pass that torch. What I'm gonna need help with is just like Lou just forwarding the email, right? Like, or just I think you actually already sent a list of some people. So I think actually in terms of that, we're probably good. But if there's some questions about, like, even if I could just know a little bit more about certain people who I don't know, so that I can make a good invitation and contextualize the invitation appropriately, that would be really helpful. So in other words, I'm trying to think of like sort of less work intensive ways that we can sort of connect with the people, because I've had similar conversations with Bea as well, who's doing a ton of amazing work, and taking on another big thing like this isn't really realistic for her, but she might be able to put us in touch with someone who has a little more sort of capacity to work with that. And then that would be the person that would be the best one to connect with. And I feel like that's the link that hasn't quite been made yet.
Yeah, this is on my mind as well, Alex, because if we do try to set up some kind of European scholarship fund, it's the similar situation where it'd be really good to find to approach people and invite them in. And definitely my experience, extending the invitation in the most personal way is the best. Definitely not kind of emails to multiple people, and ideally kind of on the WhatsApp level of intimacy, in terms of going straight to the throat, is helpful. I know for me, actually, when Julia invited me to coordinate the youth program with her at Detchenchurling last year, it was was a real honor, and it just happened. I think it was her good insight because I had time to do it. But it was really, I think it is often a case that the right person at the right time. It's a real, people love to be asked.
Yeah, let's all be in touch about this. Like Alex, let's be in touch. I mean, I'm not willing to hold the ball exclusively anymore, but I'm certainly willing to help. So we can definitely kind of co-vision, because I think, as we've talked about previously, there's other efforts that we are kind of needing to recruit people in potentially in the near future too, especially Europeans. So it's like kind of strategizing what's the best way and how do we kind of who are we inviting for what and things like that. So let's all be in touch. But I appreciate all the ideas, definitely, and Leon, I appreciate the suggestions. So we'll be in touch with you maybe as well. So yeah, I guess it's kind of realizing that this is we're kind of coming to a natural conclusion of the call on this, in terms of we're talking about the next the next call. But I did want to give space for if there's any other kind of things that want to be brought up in this one. One thing that came up for me was that I actually, in our discussion about open space and form and kind of all this stuff, is that I think it would be nice within the summit to have something relatively early on in the event that kind of somewhat something similar to the circle, square, triangle talk that Adam gave, in terms of like a space to actually like to get us to think in that way, that we're actually being inquisitive about the form of the event and thinking about it on that kind of like, to use the popular word, meta level. But like I think we kind of need to be prompted to have that to be started thinking in that way collectively. But I think that's one of the real creative opportunities of the Ziji Summit, is that we can do that in that event, and then we can take that into our centers. And I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I feel like when I go into my center, I it gave me a unique perspective where I was like, oh, people haven't thought about things like this necessarily. So this is like, it's helpful, I think, for us to like be those agents of meta thought. But yeah. What else?
One thing I was gonna ask is Michael Busby and I we're gonna be together for a weekend. Weekend after next, he's gonna be staying here with me and teaching in the Bay Area. So we'll undoubtedly talk about center directorship. And so if you guys have specific things that you'd like us to talk or vision about around this notion of Ziji folks engaged in Shambhala as employment and administration, send them my way or send them his way, and we'll try to see what we can think about and then bring back after that weekend. So that's gonna be the weekend of the 14th.
Thanks, Alex. Another thing that arose for me after hearing sort of Alex's petition to the teachers to think about the sort of difference in developing some awareness, like Corey was saying, around the sort of circle, square, triangle forms and whatnot. One other thing that I would love to have the teachers think a little bit more about, and maybe actually in conversation with some of the other organizers, is how to work with the teacher-student sort of duality and how that fits into different forms, right? Because obviously a teacher-student situation is different in a triangle situation than a square situation than a circle situation. And a lot of that arose really beautifully and spontaneously in Mexico. I felt like I was able to hang with some of the teachers. Adam Lobel gave me a huge hug at one point that was just absolutely needed and just human to human kind of thing. So I mean, those sorts of things, I think with a little bit of reflection might be able to be even amplified with a little bit of sort of reflection ahead of time. So that's something I'd love for the teachers to discuss among yourselves.
Pardon my sort of long immersion right now, but she also talked about these different voices that can come out from in different conversations, and sounds very similar, like the immortal voice and the stage and the kitchen table, and so it's like these different kinds of voices that actually she was saying like we tune into in different situations. Oh, damn it, Yuko, I was going to ask you your experience of space and you came back. You weren't there. You ruined my joke. I love it. Welcome back. What is your experience of space in this moment? You're still not there. All right, that's great. Perfect.
Now it's an experience of stillness.
Currently experiencing massive stillness, transitioning into active space. Let's keep an eye on this.
Did you want me to actually answer that question? I'm so confused.
I love it. I mean, I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to tell the teachers circle that, you know, that we're like really there's a lot of curiosity around triangle, circle, square. But right now, yes, what is your experience of space?
What is my experience of space? It is a little unknowable, I guess, but also feels very full. Did I pass?
I mean, look at all the colors. How could you fail?
I also just wanted to say, give you guys, I don't know if you received the email from that was sent out about the social change call that's happening on May 28th, that I'm going to be a part of, Deidre's going to be a part of, and so is Trinley Busby. So I'm hoping you guys can be there as well. And I would love from, you know, actually any of you, any recommendations about, and if it's something that you could even email me individually about people who I might be able to invite personally to be on that call. We're trying to have a call. Did anybody not get the email about the call, or does everyone know what I'm talking about? Okay. Leon, can you send me your email? Because that would be actually great. Okay, but does everybody else know what I'm talking about? Thumbs up, thumbs down, medium. So, okay, great. So if you guys could be on the call, or I'm really excited about having something at a more international level where we have these kinds of conversations and create space specifically for issues around social change, just creating space. Like, we don't have to get necessarily anything done, but just having this space where we connect, because I sometimes feel, especially like being in South America right now, I don't know, it can feel really hard feeling not like, you know, when you're doing something by yourself, it's hard. You're not doing anything by yourself, but it feels like you're doing it by yourself. So and I'm really motivated. I'd much rather talk to you guys than read a book. Like I really, so about how to like create social change. So I hope you can be there.
That sounds amazing. I think we have such a vast network to draw on or to draw from. And please.
Well, awesome. Any last words? Anything else that is kind of bubbling for people? It feels like we're kind of coming to an end.
I'm already dead.
You're already dead. Okay. Well, you're the liveliest dead person I've ever met. All right, folks. How about we bow out then? So thanks so much, everyone, for being here, and we will be and you'll be hearing from us, and if and when these calls will be continuing or other summit happenings are happening. So stay in touch. Talk to you soon.
And I think I just want to ask if Leon knows it in any other language.
Do I know what other language?
The dedication of merit in the language of English.
No.
Okay, I still don't know it in Russian yet. I failed my homework. Okay, then maybe we could dedicate the merit and
sure.
do something next time.
You guys want to lead it?
Wait, what about Spanish?
I don't know it in Spanish by heart either.
Yeah, I don't know.
Not by heart.
No. Almost.
By the confidence of the golden sun of the great ladies, may the dark
Bye, Lou.
Bye.
Bye, guys.